Welcome to the Aligned Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Pooja Venkatraman. I'm a double Harvard grad, former BCG consultant, and now an executive coach for high achievers. On this podcast, we are going to tackle the 4 key things that you need to figure out in order to live a life of aligned ambition. Those 4 things are stress, productivity, performance, and purpose. We are going to make sure that you're driving your car in the direction that you actually want to go. That is the purpose part. We're also going to make sure that your progress along the road is consistent and effective. That's the productivity and performance part. And we're going to make sure that the fuel you're pouring into your tank isn't so noxious that it's filling your car with fumes and making the whole ride miserable. That is the stress part. Because if you can tackle those 4 things, stress, productivity, performance, and purpose, you can build the life and the career that you actually want. Not the life you think you're supposed to have, not the life that burns you out or doesn't fit quite right, but the life you actually want. One that fulfills your biggest ambitions and unleashes your fullest potential without sacrificing your sanity, your relationships, your authenticity, or your paycheck. A life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. That's what aligned ambition is all about. Let's get started. Hey guys, I am so excited for this week's topic. We are going to be talking about the top 5 challenges that high achievers face when they get promoted. So I recently did a series of events with another excellent executive coach. Her name is Megan Porter. She focuses on coaching first-time C-suite leaders. And we did an event series together for the HBS Women's Association. It was called Charting Your Course to the C-Suite. And we talked about how to aim for the right C-suite role for you, then how to actually land that role, and then how to succeed in that role. So we just did the most recent, the last session of that series, which is how to succeed in a C-suite role. And Megan took us through the top 5 challenges that new C-suite leaders face. These are the main themes or topics that she finds herself coaching her clients on again and again. And as we were doing the session, I was kind of having the reflection, hey, I actually think that these are challenges that all high achievers face when they get promoted, when they start managing a team for the first time or managing a larger team than they've managed before, and when their scope increases and they're leading at a more senior level. So if you're at the C-suite, you're sort of facing the challenges maybe at the, at the highest level or at the most extreme. But I actually think you face a version of these challenges throughout your career every time you level up, are managing more people, managing a larger scope, and have gotten promoted. So I asked her permission and she was like, yes, feel free to share my ideas and share my frameworks with all of your audience as well. And so I'm so excited to share this with you because these are the themes that she's seen, some of the frameworks and tools that she uses with her clients. And listening to it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really insightful, really helpful. And I can't wait to bring it to all of my clients as well. And if you're interested in chatting with Megan, I put her contact information in the episode description. You can always reach out to her and chat to her as well. So the 5 things, the top 5 challenges that I think high achievers face when they get promoted or increase their scope. So challenge number 1, it's called telescoping, right? And it's basically about hitting the right level of detail across an increasingly large set of priorities. So if you're managing people or you're managing more people than you've ever managed before, you might be someone who's used to getting into the details, right, of what you're doing. If you're an individual contributor or like when you do the work yourself, you can get to the full level of detail you want. As you start managing more and more people, you can't be as in depth with everyone's work as you may be used to being or as you may want to be, right? And now you have to decide where is it worth it for me to get more in depth and get into the nitty gritty versus where can I stay higher level, right? And so the skill of telescoping is really figuring out what's the right level of depth that I have to hit at all these different things that are coming across my plate. And there's this great analogy that Megan gave as well, which is like, it's very normal for your ears to pop, right? If you imagine you're in a plane that's like landing or like is taking off and you're changing altitudes, it's very normal for your ears to pop as you're changing altitudes. And it's very normal to have a little bit of like a mental transition time as you're going from very, very nitty gritty to very, very high level, right? So kind of knowing that that is a normal thing that could be happening. And this is a skill that you now have to build. You probably haven't had to flex this muscle as much before. And now you're really having to put your brain power towards it and figure out when can I be really high level? When should I really get down in the nitty gritty? So first off, just to know this is a new challenge, right? If you've recently been promoted or if your scope has increased, you're probably really good at like the functional aspects of your job. So if you're in marketing, you're good at marketing. If you're in finance, you're good at finance. If you're a consultant, you're good at like doing models, making slides, right? Like doing the research. So you're good at like the normal, the like day-to-day of your job. This is a different skill. This is not the skill of being good at the day-to-day. This is the skill of kind of overseeing someone else or overseeing a whole team of people who are doing those day-to-day things. And now you have to know at what level to engage with what they're doing so that you can manage them effectively. So that's the first thing for you to even know is this is a different skill than just doing your day-to-day job. And it's something you're going to need reps on to really get right, and something you're going to need to actively think about to figure out how you want to do. So a great tool to be able to telescope more effectively is first just to define for yourself, what is your scorecard for the role, right? What is the definition of success in the role? What do you need to get done, by when, and how? Those are the three simplest elements of the scorecard. You really want to know for your role, what do you want to get done, by when, and how? What does success look like for you? It sounds so simple, but I think you'd be surprised. You might, even as I say that, you might realize, wait, I don't have a clearly articulated scorecard for my role, for my quarter, for my year, for what exactly I'm trying to do. A lot of people don't have a scorecard clearly articulated for themselves for their role and for the time frame that they're in. So it's so simple, but it saves you so much time and energy if you can take some time to just define, what does success look like? What are the outcomes that I'm aiming for here, by when, and how? So once you have your scorecard defined, you can use it to help you decide when should you go really deep into the nitty-gritty and when can you stay high level. Because every time you are coming across a piece of work, whether you're assessing something another team is doing, assessing something one of your team members is doing, you're deciding how involved you want to get, you can always come back to your scorecard and you can ask yourself, does this drive an outcome in my scorecard, right? And that's the how does this tie to my scorecard? And if it ties very closely, then I might want to look a little bit more closely at it, right? So you can use your scorecard to decide how deep or how high level you want to get into different items. The other question that you can ask yourself is, am I uniquely qualified to accelerate this item? Or should I give it to someone else? Is someone else either equally qualified or even more qualified than I am to accelerate this? So the combination of those two questions, one is just really keeping your eye on what are the key things that I'm trying to drive? What does success look like? And how does this thing that I'm trying to decide how deep to get into, how does that tie to my ultimate, like the bar of success I'm trying to meet? That's kind of thing one. And then thing two to ask yourself is, am I the one that should get in the weeds? Am I the one that should get into the details in this? Or is there someone else who's equally or more capable of accelerating this, in which case I should give it to someone else, right? But those two very simple questions can really help you build the skill of telescoping, because you'll always know how much does this matter and am I the only one that can do it, right? And if so, if it's yes on both, you may have to go more nitty gritty, but if it doesn't tie that closely to your scorecard, or if you're not the only one who can help accelerate it, then you can stay higher level, right? Super simple, but so effective as you're building the skill of deciding how deep or how shallow to go in all the different things that are going on across your plate. A couple more tactical things that you can do as well. You can, if it's possible, you can try to group your high level things and your nitty gritty things on your calendar or on your to-do list so that you're not having to toggle as much between the two. If you have kind of that ears popping sensation, right? If you don't like to have to be like super, super inside a Gantt chart and a timeline and figuring out dates and then zooming way out and being like, okay, where do we need to be in 5 years, right? And where are our competitors trying to go in 5 years? And therefore, how should we position ourselves? If that's a ear-popping transition for you, you can also try to group things on your calendar or your to-do list that you have a bunch of high-level things, then you have a bunch of nitty-gritty things. That's one thing you can do. You can also try to have a little bit of an accountability partner, right? You can share wherever you can, maybe with some of your direct reports, right? If you are comfortable and you guys have a trusting relationship, you can let them know, hey, I think one of my holdbacks is going to be that I'm going to have the instinct to go too deep on this, but I actually want you to own this. I want you to own the nitty gritty. I want to stay higher level. So keep me honest. Help me pull myself back up if you notice me going into a deeper level, because that's my goal here, right? So you can actually share that with your direct reports if it makes sense, and have them help you, stay higher level and keep you accountable. It's very normal to want to go into the details. That's usually where people want to go when they've been promoted, because it's your comfort zone, right? You know how to do the day-to-day work. And so it's going to feel natural and easier and comfortable to just get into it with somebody, or get into it and do it yourself, rather than stay at that higher level. That's probably going to feel more uncomfortable to you. So actually letting some of your direct reports know that you're aiming to stay higher level and that you want them to own the nitty-gritty can be a great way to have a little bit of that accountability. And of course, having a coach is a great way to have that accountability as well, right? Because a coach can also help pull you up and kind of think about, hang on, do I need to go this much into the details? What's the full slate of priorities? And they can ask you those very simple questions. What's the definition of success here? Does this tie to the definition of success? Does this drive any important outcomes? And are you the only one who can do it, or can anyone else do it? Right? So those are some tactical things that you can do to build the skill of telescoping, right? And really learning when to go deep and when to stay higher level. I'll also give you some mindset tips that can help you with the telescoping. right? Because I think what tends to happen to high achievers is if you have the thought, I don't know enough. I don't know enough to have an answer. I don't know enough to lead effectively. That can put your brain a little bit below the line. We talked about the concept of your brain being above the line or below the line in the last episode. So you can go listen to that one if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But that threat framing thought, right, of like, I don't know enough to have an answer can make you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to do everything. I have to get into the details. I have to get into the nitty gritty. And probably that's going to involve you working a lot of hours, right? And doing a lot more work than you normally would do. Overworking, trying to learn everything about everything, trying to get your fingers into all the different pies. And it can end up being a short path to burnout or a short path to kind of capping your potential and capping the level you can reach because your plate will be so full trying to manage everything in a detailed way. You'll be like, I can't possibly take on any more scope. Like my plate is completely full, right? And unfortunately, when you get that much into the details, you don't even necessarily get a better answer, right? Or a better outcome. Often you get so in the weeds that you can lose the forest for the trees, right? So there's not even an advantage to going that deep on everything. So as you're building the skill of telescoping, some of the mindset, reminders that you can use, one, of course, being, hey, this is a skill. I need to build it. This is required at this level. At the previous level, I could get more into the details. Now I'm building the skill of managing at a higher level. Just even knowing it's a skill can be helpful. The other things that you can use is, first off, just reminding yourself, you've done this before. You've learned new skills. You've climbed learning curves. You know how to do this, right? It's not the first time that you've done something that makes you uncomfortable or that feels new to you. So think about times in the past when you've rapidly climbed learning curves, when you've adapted to a new skill, when you've done something that felt unfamiliar, but you made it feel familiar to you ultimately. Think about what worked then, what your methodology is for climbing learning curves, and apply it here, right? You already know how to do this. This is not your first time learning a new skill. And the second thing that I think can help is realizing you're going to have to adapt, right? You're not going to get it exactly right off the bat. Don't put pressure on yourself to know exactly the level of detail you should go into for every single thing. Take your best first guess, right? You've got some great questions that you can ask yourself to help you calibrate. You've got some structures that you can use. Take your best first guess and then know that you will probably have to adapt as you go. That's not you doing a bad job. That's a completely normal part of the process. But that's skill number one that high achievers often have to build when they get promoted is the skill of telescoping. And now that they're not doing all the work themselves, they're not in the details as much as they used to be, really honing the muscle of when do I go deep and when do I stay high level. That's skill number one. Skill number two, in the C-suite session, we talked about upgrading your team, right? So really assessing how is the structure of the team underneath you? How is the quality of the people? What's their level of fit to the role? And then in your whole team underneath you, and then making changes as much as necessary, right? You might have to restructure your team, or you might be changing some people out and really kind of upgrading your team. You may or may not have that level of flexibility if you have just been promoted, right? You might not be able to fully restructure your team, hire people, fire people, but the change that you'll still have to make, and that still applies to you, is really thinking about managing your team and thinking, do I have the right people? And if I'm seeing not strong performance, how do I get better performance out of people? I think it's very easy for anyone, right, to kind of feel like, hey, I want to be nice. I want to be nice to the people on my team. I want to be well liked. And I think it can be easy for people to think, okay, I've got the team I've got. Let me just make it work with who I have and let me just fill in all the gaps if I need to. And I will get the results that we need to get, but I'm just going to work with the folks I have. It's a natural tendency that people can have if they feel like they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to create a lot of waves. So it's like, it's okay. I'll just accept everyone's performance as it is, and then I'll just make it work. I'll do what I can. But I actually think you're much better served as a leader to really think critically about how is every member of my team doing? And is this team structure underneath me? Does it work? Does this make sense? And really having some agency for yourself and thinking about, can I restructure the team? Can I at least think about what a better structure would be? And if someone isn't performing to the level I want them to perform, what can I do to try to get better performance out of them, right? Not just saying, okay, it is what it is. I'll do what I can and I'll fill in the gaps if I have to, but really thinking about what can I do to improve the performance. So a couple simple tools that you can use. One is we talked about having the scorecard for your own role, right? What's the definition of success? What do you want to get done by when and how? Now that you know the scorecard for your own role, you can also get one level deeper and think about, okay, therefore, what are the scorecards? What are the definitions of success for the people that are under me? What do they need to get done by when and how, right? And how does that ladder up to your overall scorecard? So it's very simple, but it gives you a way to assess, how is everyone doing? Are they performing well or are they not performing well, right? And it's a much clearer and more nuanced way of assessing someone's performance than just asking, are they good? Are they smart? Are they dedicated? Or do they work like I do, right? Do they do it the way that I would do it? Those aren't as strong of questions to really assess your team. It's much better for you to think about what do they need to achieve, by when and how, and then how well are they performing on those metrics? So once you have a sense of the scorecards of the definitions of success for the people under you, you then want to start thinking about how can I gather data on how they're doing against those things? Is it pretty clear already just from our regular meetings and from me seeing their work? Would I already gather the data I need? Or do I need to set up situations? Do I need to give them a little bit of room to run and then see how they perform? Do I need to dig in a little bit more in one area and see what they're up to for me to gather the data to see how are they performing on that scorecard? Do I believe in their ability to execute on this, right? And as you gather that data, you want to have some sense of just a red, yellow, green, right? Green, they're doing great. I have full confidence that they'll be able to achieve everything. Yellow, okay, they may need some coaching. They may need some more feedback or a little bit more of a push. But if they take the feedback or they get the coaching, then I'm confident in their ability to execute. Or red, right? Like, ooh, I'm actually not sure this person can do what's needed to be done. They're not on track for doing what needs to be done to fulfill their scorecard. So having some sense of what their scorecard is, figuring out how you can gather data against it, and having some level of a red, yellow, green assessment of how are they doing, right? And it's not about all of these tools help you get very nuanced about your assessments and really keep it objective, right? Objective and mechanical. It's not about are they a good person? It's not about are they smart? Are they hardworking? Are they dedicated? Right? All these broad blanket statements about someone. It really is about what's their fit to the scorecard. What do they need to do in order to succeed in this role? And are they well set up to do those things? And this is a much better way to assess your team and just approach leadership than to just say, okay, I've got who I've got. I'm just going to make it work with who I've got. Sometimes you do still have to do that, right? Sometimes you don't have any options to really make any changes, but still for you to have the perspective of, I'm not just going to take whatever I'm given and then just, plug all the gaps myself. I'm really going to think critically about, is the structure underneath me the right structure? Is the work divided up in a way that makes sense? And then is each person a good fit to the scorecard that goes with their role? This is another thing that I think is really helpful to have a thought partner on. This is something you can also talk about with your coach, is really game plan and problem solve. What's all the work that needs to get done? And then how is my team set up? And what's the data that I'm gathering about each person? And do I think they're a good fit for the scorecard? These are conversations I have with my clients all the time. So it's great to have an external thought partner to help you think about this. And one kind of mindset tip that can be helpful as you're thinking about this is to really separate the personal from the mechanical. Right? I like to think about assessments as two ends of a spectrum. You can be very, very personal in your assessment of a situation, or you can be very, very mechanical in your assessment of a situation. And so if you're very personal in your assessments of how your team is doing, it'll tend to either sound like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I feel bad. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to make things awkward, right? So people will just tend to stay quiet and not do anything. Or the other end of that can also be the flip side of that coin can actually be like being quite judgmental, right? And having all these blanket statements about someone like, oh, they're not committed. They don't know what they're doing. They're not smart. They just don't have it, right? That's also not a strong assessment of how someone is performing. So you want to get away from the personal side of the spectrum and you want to go towards the mechanical side of the spectrum, which having a clear definition of success, having data points that you've gathered, and then having a red, yellow, green assessment of how likely you think this person is to succeed against their scorecard points. All of those are a way of being much more mechanical in your assessments, because assessing your team, talking to your team about their performance can be emotional, right? Like, because it can feel very personal to people, it can bring up strong feelings. And so because emotions can be so high, that's actually the reason you want to be as mechanical and as objective in your thinking as possible. So that's the second skill that high achievers often have to build when they get promoted or their scope increases. The third skill that high achievers have to build is relationship and stakeholder management. Really managing all your relationships in all directions, right? Parallel to you, with your team, your leadership and people above you, and even outside the company, if you interface a lot with people that are outside the company. And this is something that a lot of high achievers can feel a little bit allergic to, right? They can feel like, I just don't want to do the work. I just want to do the work. I don't want to do politics. I don't want to do schmoozing. I don't want to have to be talking to people and showboating and telling them about my work. I just want to do the work. It's very common for people to feel like, ooh, I don't want to do this part. But it's not a popularity contest. It's not a schmoozing contest. It's not about making people like you or suddenly becoming a politician. Instead, I want you to think about your relationships as your stakeholders as these are the relationships I need to get things done. Right? So bringing it back to your scorecard, bringing it back to your definition of success, chances are you can't achieve all the things on your scorecard entirely by yourself or even just entirely with your own team. Chances are you need help from other people and other teams. Things need to be aligned. They need to do things. Things need to be handed off in order for you to meet your bar of success. And so I want you to think about relationship and stakeholder management in that context. It's not about being liked or schmoozing or playing politics. It's about having the right relationships and having trust in the right places in order to get things done, right? Which hopefully takes some of the like sleaziness out of it and makes it feel more like work, because it is actual just real work. The other tool that you can use, right? Once you know what your scorecard is, you can plot the key relationships that you need to build in a 2x2. And you can map it as x-axis that has how important is this person to your scorecard, to you achieving the things that you want to achieve. And on the y-axis, how strong is that relationship? Right. And when you make that 2x2, you'll very quickly be able to see who are the people who are very important to me getting the things done that I need to get done, but the relationship isn't as strong as I want it to be. Right. And those are probably the relationships that you're going to want to focus on to build and make even stronger. And every dot on that 2x2, every dot on that matrix should be one human being. Right? I don't want you to think in terms of monoliths, right? Like, oh, I need a better relationship with marketing. I need a better relationship with engineering, right? That person doesn't exist. It's always a specific human being. Oh, I need a better relationship with Sally in marketing. I need a better relationship with Bob in engineering. So you should think in terms of individual humans, not departments, not monoliths, not groups. And then you can plot them on this 2x2 to really get a sense of what are the relationships that are most important to me achieving the things on my scorecard and how strong are they? And let me focus on the ones that aren't as strong. The other tool that can be really helpful, especially if you've recently been promoted or recently increased your scope, is just do a listening tour. Go around, talk to everybody, meet everybody, and actually listen. Don't do a talking tour. Don't do a broadcasting tour, right? Do an actual listening tour. Listen to folks, listen to their perspective, ask them what success means for them, ask them what advice they would have for you, ask them what they would change if they were in your position, what they wouldn't change, what their concerns are. And just really listen to their perspective and get the context from them. A lot of times when people, especially if they've recently been promoted and they're meeting a lot of new people or kind of establishing themselves, they might feel the pressure to talk, right? To impress people and to show I'm qualified for this job and I'm going to do a great job here. That's actually not, it's neither is that the most effective for impressing people, nor is that actually even the most helpful to you. You actually want to be spending more time listening, asking questions, gaining context, gaining perspective, not so much broadcasting and talking about how awesome you are, right? So that when you're thinking about managing your relationships, really think about listening, gaining their perspective, gaining their context, really understanding things from their perspective, and then mapping your relationships to understand which are the ones that you need to prioritize so you can get things done as effectively as possible. Now on the mindset side, right? A couple things that I see people kind of thinking and feeling that prevents them from doing this. One is, like I said, people saying, I don't like this. This is politics. This is not the work. This is not the real work that I signed up to do. This is just a distraction. I don't like this. This all feels very sleazy. I think the reality is, especially as you get more and more senior, this is the real work. We talked a little bit about the core functional work, right? Whether it's marketing, finance, strategy and analysis, whatever it might be, more and more that's going to be done by your team. And that's the stuff that you already know how to do, right? You probably have to spend less mental bandwidth worrying about that. This is now a real part of your role, managing relationships, managing stakeholders, working with others to get things done, protecting your team, getting your team resources. All of these have become part of your purview. This is now an official part of your job, right? And so it's not a distraction from the real work. It is the real work. So for you to take the time and map your relationships in that 2x2 and then spend 20, 30 minutes brainstorming, how do I improve my relationship with Sally, right? Should I get a cadence of calls with her? Should I schedule a meeting? Should I try to do this? What should I do? But for you to really invest the time and think about how do I improve these relationships? How do I plan for these meetings? How I set up these interactions? How do I make this happen? It's actually a really valuable use of your time. It's not politics. It's not being sleazy. It's actually you being really effective at a thing that is now part of your job, right? And it is real work. It's not a distraction from the real work. The other thought that I see blocking people from doing this effectively is they tell themselves, I'm bad at this, right? I often hear high achievers say, no, I'm good at the work. I'm not good at this part. And I don't like this part. right? And I don't know what to do here. Like you say, go improve the relationship with Sally. How am I supposed to do that? Of course, this is all very custom. This is something I talk a lot about with my clients, and Megan talks a lot with her clients. And so of course, if you come talk to one of us, you can always get our insights on, in your particular situation, what's the best way to do it. But the best piece of advice I can give you, outside of the custom advice for your situation, is put yourself in the other person's shoes and take the time to really do it. Don't just put yourself in their shoes for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Take 10 minutes. 15 minutes, really put yourself in their shoes. Think about their incentives, what success is like for them, what information they have, what they do day to day, how they see the world, and really try to understand their perspective. Think about times when you've been in the situation they're in right now, right? When the roles have been reversed and you've been on the other side of the table for whatever the situation is. Think about that as well. If you really take the time to put yourself in the other person's shoes, you're going to have some ideas about how to handle the interaction, how to improve the relationship, and what you can do there. So that's the one tip I can give you that applies across the board, but this is the one that really tends to be custom to the situation. So it's a great reason to come talk to me or come talk to Megan, and we can advise you on your particular situation. The next thing that high achievers often have to build and work on when they get promoted is something we called in the session as executive resilience. And to me, what executive resilience really means is being able to withstand disagreement, conflict, and pushback. Right? This is a real new skill that you have to build as you're leveling up. When you're more junior, of course, you still push back, right? And have conflict, but there kind of reaches a level where it's like, okay, it's been decided. It's been decided top down. And now you have your marching orders and you just have to run with it. Right? And as you get more and more senior, that flips, right? It's not about you just taking your marching orders, and it's not about you getting some pushback, getting some disagreement from someone else or from someone more senior and just saying, okay, I guess you're right. I'll put my head down and do it. That starts becoming a real liability as you get more and more senior. And so the skill of executive resilience is really about you being able to hear pushback, a different perspective, conflict, skepticism, whatever it might be. And for you to be able to emotionally withstand that and to hear their perspective, hear where they're coming from, see how what they're saying might make sense or might make sense given where they're standing, and to still hold on to your perspective, right? And not to be totally bowled over, not to people please, right? Not to fawn, but to be like, okay, I hear where you're coming from, but I still know what I think. The first step to be able to do this is really to take the time to decide what you do think, right? Develop real conviction in your own perspectives. Take the time to do this. Look at the data, look at everything you have available to you, and really decide, what do I think about the situation? You might be surprised how often people don't do this, right? Where they're just responding to the demands they're hearing from everyone else, and they're not taking the time to really say, what do I think? What's my opinion? What's my A+ answer in this situation? So the first step is even setting the time aside to say, what's my perspective on the situation? Let me gather the data, let me look at the facts, and let me really decide, what do I think, right? Not just how am I planning to bend to what everyone else thinks and just execute on what I'm hearing from everyone, but truly, what do I think, right? That's step one, is even deciding what your opinion is and taking some time to actually form it. And then once you've formed it, it's about being able to withstand that disagreement, that skepticism, that pushback, not immediately folding under it, right? Like you might do when you're more junior, but instead to be able to say, I am going to figure out a way to hold my perspective while also hearing and listening and understanding their perspective. And then I'm going to figure out how am I going to move this other person, right? How am I going to persuade them to see my side of things, even if their starting point is that they're skeptical and they disagree, and maybe they're even judging me for having the perspective that I have, even if that's their starting point, right? I'm going to be able to think, no, but I know what I'm talking about. I know that I think there's a really strong case from my perspective, and I'm going to figure out, how do I persuade you? How do I show you the right pieces of information such that you will come over to my side, or we reach some kind of middle ground agreement? The mindset that I think that really helps with this is thinking of yourself not as a student who's getting a grade, right? Or who's being evaluated by someone else, but instead truly thinking of yourself as a leader and a steward of these results. Right? Because if you think of yourself as a student, or if you feel like a student, then as soon as you start hearing pushback, you start to think, okay, maybe I'm wrong, right? Or at the very least, the teacher is mad at me, right? The teacher is upset with me, and I need to make sure that the teacher feels good about me and likes me above everything else, right? And so your brain will want to start shrinking back from your perspective and just agreeing with what the other person says and going with it, right? And saying, okay, I accept that as a constraint. That's what we're doing. Let's just figure out how to do it. Versus if you think of yourself as a leader and a steward, right? If you're like, hey, my responsibility is to get these results to be achieved. whatever it takes, right? That's what I'm taking full responsibility for, is these results need to be achieved. I've taken the time. I've dug into the data, and I really have conviction that this is the way to move forward, right? I'm not just saying that off the top of my head. I'm not just saying that to be difficult. I've really looked at it with my expertise, with my viewpoint. I've looked at everything, and I honestly, truly believe, as the leader, right? Not even just from ego, but as the steward of these results, I really believe that this is the path forward, right? And when you're thinking of yourself as the leader and the steward, you become the bigger person, right? You become the person who's like, I have the capacity. I have the capacity to hold your disagreement, hold your skepticism, hold your pushback, hold your negative opinion of me, right? That you might dip into for a little while based on where you're coming from. I can hold all of that, and I can transition both of us through that. And I know that I have to. I have to, because I know that that's what's better for the company overall. That's what's better for actually achieving these results. And so I'm willing to have you think whatever you need to think about me for the short term. I'm willing to have you push back. I'm willing to have you be upset. And I'm not doing it just to serve my own ego. I'm doing it because I'm a steward of these results, and I'm a leader. And so I'm willing to feel the friction. I'm willing to have you be upset with me, because I know at the end of the day, we have to do what's right, right? Those are some of the mindsets that can really help develop that executive resilience to push back and conflict and skepticism. And then the last skill set that high achievers have to develop when they get promoted and increase their scope and start leading at a higher level is enterprise mindset. Right? An enterprise mindset is all about you really solving for and caring about what the entire company as a whole needs, not just what your team and your department needs. Right? And so this is about you having a sense of not only your own scorecard, right? Your team's scorecard, your scorecard, and the scorecards of the people under you, but you really having a sense of what's the company's scorecard? What's my leader's scorecard? What are they trying to get done? What does success look like for them? When and by how? And then for the whole company, well, what's the whole company trying to get done? And by when and how, right? And really understanding what everyone's definitions of success look like. And understanding there might be times when you and your scorecard have to take a loss in order to create a bigger win for your leader, for the broader team, or for the company overall. And when you have an enterprise mindset, right, then you're not going to take that personally. You're not going to get defensive, and you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, I need to get all the resources and all the teams and all the wins for me, because hey, success here is me getting the win, right? And me coming out looking like I'm really, good, or like I've won here. Instead, you want to have that enterprise mindset of like, we're all here to achieve a larger goal, right? Like we're not here just to execute marketing for the sake of executing marketing, right? Or like do analysis for the sake of doing analysis. We're trying to do something larger as a company, right? We're trying to deliver this product. We're trying to deliver this service, whatever it is we do, but we have a larger scorecard that we're all solving for. And I want to be someone who keeps that in mind. And when the larger scorecard is in conflict with my scorecard, I'm going to be graceful about it, right? I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not going to be sort of selfish or grumpy or any of those things. I'm going to realize we're all here for a larger purpose. And if my team or my resources or my success has to take a bit of a hit, right, for the purpose of a larger good, I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to be graceful about that, right? And I'm going to let people know I'm a good team player when it makes sense, right? When for the larger purpose of what we're all trying to achieve, if I have to take a hit or if my team has to take a hit, I get it, and I'm going to be graceful about it, right? That's the last skill set that people have to build. And I think one mindset tool that can be really helpful in doing that is really tapping into the larger mission of what your company is trying to achieve. Because like we talked about, you're not here just for the sake of, executing your functional work. At the end of the day, all companies exist to solve a real problem for a real person. That's the only reason any team is ever assembled, any company is ever formed, right? It's easy to feel very far away from the real person and the real problem, especially if you work in corporate headquarters, right? If you for example, if you work at Chipotle, you're probably not handing lunch, right, to Chipotle customers. You're probably sitting at a desk, looking at spreadsheets, looking at reports, and sending messages on Slack and on email, right? And so it's very easy as a corporate worker to be so far removed from the front lines of delivering the product and service, and your experience of it is so in the aggregate, right? It's all these aggregated metrics and reports. It's not really touching and feeling the actual customer experience. It's very common, right? So then it's very easy to lose touch with the mission, with the purpose, with the why behind what we're all doing here, right? And then it's much easier to just kind of feel more territorial, right? And to feel like, no, what matters is my fiefdom and my goals and my team, and screw you guys, right? I don't want to give up anything. But the more that you can connect back to the larger mission of what the whole company is doing, what the whole point of all of this is, the larger scorecard that you guys are all trying to serve, the easier it is to have that enterprise mindset and to be more graceful about trade-offs when they make sense, when your team does have to take a hit, for you to actually be a really good team player in those situations. It's not always easy or natural, right? Like partly because you can be very far removed from the actual delivery of the product or the service and the actual customer. But I'll say, I'm someone who is on the front lines of delivering my product, right? Like I coach all my clients. So I'm right there as the product delivery is happening. And I'm in a very mission-driven career. I love what I do. I help people make their lives and their careers better. And I still have to tap back into my own mission all the time. It is so easy to get lost in just the day-to-day, the shuffle of all the tasks and everything you have to do and the metrics and where you stand, that even me, who is on the front lines and loves my job and is very driven by the mission of what I do, I can very easily lose touch of the purpose and the larger why, which means it's even easier for you if you're not on the front lines and if you aren't maybe necessarily as passionate about your career as I am about mine, all the more so it's so easy to lose touch with the larger purpose of what you're doing, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it to tap back into that bigger why. Not only does it make it easier for you to do the enterprise mindset kind of skill set and build that muscle, but frankly, it often gives people a greater sense of purpose and meaning to what they're doing in any case. So those are the 5 skills that high achievers need to build when they get promoted, when their scope increases, and when they level up in their career. And I will say those are all new skills, right? Or skills that you have to spend more bandwidth on than you have had to in the past. The functional skills, the skills that have gotten you here so far, are really strong. You're going to continue using them, but they're probably going to require less and less bandwidth on your part, and they've really become table stakes. They're not going to be what differentiates you anymore. Now what's going to differentiate you is these 5 skills and your ability to telescope really effectively, manage your team and get the best performance out of them, manage your relationships and your stakeholders really effectively, withstand disagreement and conflict and pushback and skepticism, and stay strong in your perspective from that leader and steward mindset, not from an ego-driven mindset, and your ability to have an enterprise perspective, make trade-offs when necessary, and also just have a perspective. That's a piece I didn't mention about enterprise mindset. It's not just about making trade-offs and taking a hit. It's also about having a perspective and contributing outside your own lane, right? Even if you're in marketing, you can have a perspective on what legal should be doing or what finance should be doing. You may not have the answer, but you can turn your brain on and be like, hang on, I'm thinking about this too. I'm thinking about larger success for the company. And so I can make contributions outside my own lane. That's another part of enterprise mindset. Those are the 5 skills you really need to be going to be building, the newer muscles in your, in your body, in your kind of mental body that you'll have to be building as you get promoted and you grow in scope. So first off, for you to know, this is normal, right? They're new skills. You're not failing. Nothing's going wrong. If you find yourself struggling with these, you haven't had to build these muscles as much before, right? So it makes sense that these would be the main things that you're focusing on, and the places where that a lot of your bandwidth is going as you're kind of getting settled into your new role. And these are things that you are going to want to unpack and talk through with somebody. They're new skills. They're often quite interpersonal, right? There's a lot of like people dynamics involved, and chances are you're really going to want to talk it through with someone else and problem solve them explicitly. These aren't things that you're going to just quickly figure out in your head, like while you're between meetings or while you're between emails. These are things you're going to want to set aside time to really think through and problem solve how you want to approach these situations. Now, you can always problem solve with your peers and with other people in the company. You can problem solve with your friends, with your spouse. These are all the normal people often go to problem solve with, but they may not be the best people to problem solve with. Your own peers in the company, obviously, they have their own agendas, they have their own perspectives, so they may not be super unbiased. And of course, they're not necessarily, like an objective third party who's just here to help you, right? They have their own agendas that they also need to manage. Your spouse or your friends, they may not have any other agendas, right? Because they may not work at the same company as you, and they're totally on your side, but they may not have enough context to really help you problem solve this. And chances are they're not going to push you, right? They're going to let you vent, but they're not going to ask you tough questions and really push you to problem solve. Which is why it can be so helpful to have a coach, right? A coach is an objective third party. They don't work at your company, so they don't have any other agenda besides really helping you figure this out. You can give them all of the context so they really understand what's going on, and they're there to help you problem solve. Of course, you can always vent a little bit if you want to, but at the end of the day, they're there to help you problem solve and figure out how to be as effective as possible. They're not going to let you off the hook, right? If you're not handling the situation as well as you possibly could. And the last thing I'll say, it is if you've recently been promoted or if you've recently had your scope increase, you're going to want to invest in a coach and just invest in building these skills ASAP. You want to overinvest in the first 6 to 12 months and really set yourself up well right off the bat. All of these things are way easier to do if you just invest upfront and get them all set up smoothly. It is much harder to not have invested and then be cleaning up messes on the back end, right? If on the back end, you're like, wait, I'm at the wrong level of detail on all the, on all my initiatives, I'm too detailed in some, I'm too high level in the other. I don't have strong relationships. I haven't really thought critically about how to improve my team. I haven't had like resilience to kind of withstand disagreement, and I have not been kind of contributing at an enterprise level. All of those are way harder to sort of solve afterwards, or to like walk back if you haven't done them well. It's much easier to just from a clean slate, get yourself set up really, really well, and then ride the wave, ride the momentum of having done it well. So those are all the reasons why it can be super, super helpful to bring in a coach and help you do these things. The session that Megan and I did, and like this podcast episode, gives you a lot of broad general skills. That these are the themes that tend to be true pretty much no matter what your company is, what your industry is, what your context is. These things, generally speaking, hold true. They can give you a running start in your new role and in your new scope. But the reality is all of the best advice is really custom to the situation, right? Of course, so much is dependent on context, on you, on the situation, your strengths, your perspectives. When I talk about these things with my clients, we get so into detail, and truly the advice that applies to one situation would not apply at all in another situation, right? Like the best guidance is really, really custom to the context. And so a great way to actually get some expert perspective on your context is to book a free career audit with me. The link to do that is in the episode description. We can get deep in the details of your company, your role, what your scorecard is, what the challenges are you're facing, and how you can address them. And of course, Megan also does this work. She works with first-time C-suite leaders, but if she's someone whose perspective you'd like to get, I put her email in the episode description as well. But do yourself the favor of getting an expert perspective on your particular situation, if you've been recently promoted or if your scope has grown. And then also do yourself the favor of investing. Invest in these skills upfront. These are new skills or skills that you're going to be using a lot more than you're used to using in the past. And it's normal to not be an expert at them, right? Because you haven't been using these skills as much so far. You've been working on building your functional excellence, but of course you haven't been working on these things because you haven't had to. So they're new skills, they're critical skills for success. Things go a lot better when you overinvest and just set yourself up to succeed and set yourself up to coast and have momentum afterward than if you don't invest and then you're playing catch up. And having a coach to really help you problem solve, unpack, provide thought partnership, provide pattern recognition, because me and Megan see these things all the time. It's not our first time dealing with these situations, but someone who's an objective third party, who's on your side, has no other agenda, has full context, and can really kind of push you to problem solve, is one of the best gifts that you can give yourself, and is a real career accelerant when you find yourself in one of these high stakes, newly promoted roles. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And like I said, the link to book a free career audit with me is in the episode description. I put Megan's contact information in the episode description as well. I'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Aligned Ambition podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and share this podcast with anyone you know that you think could use it. If you'd like to explore working together in a one-on-one coaching engagement with me, book a free consult call at poojavcoaching.com/contact. You can grab that link in the episode description. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or topics you want me to cover in this podcast, shoot me an email at pooja@poojavcoaching.com. You can grab that in the episode description too. Talk to you soon.